Hello and welcome to the Captain, Dave Brock. I was looking at your website, Dave, and the band's just come back from the Milky Way.
That's right, yeah.
That was a gig in Amsterdam called Milky Way.
Milky Way, yeah.
Yeah, and was it a very space rock concert?
Yeah, it was
festival?
jolly fun. We love Amsterdam. I used to live there many years ago, so, you know, great place to play in.
Of course, that was where you started your busking.
My busking.
And the blues era.
Living in a Mercedes car, busking in the streets of Amsterdam, yeah.
Did you revisit those places?
Well, no, I had a flat actually in Jacobstraat, which is sort of one of the little sort of alleys that lead off one of the main sort of shopping centres. So I showed you, didn't I, Chris? And had a look at the place. I used to live up the top there, up these rickety old stairs.
Right. And then come down and do busking during the day.
Yeah, I used to go up busking, and then you know we stayed where we had a place in Hirangra, you know,
right.
Which was a students' sort of centre.
Right.
But we used to play actually. I mean, I was playing sort of went over there and we did a tour actually as a famous cure in Amsterdam many years ago,
Right.
and we were playing sort of psychedelic blues and stuff like that.
Right.
And we were touring with a tent then, I think.
My goodness.
You know, big circus tent.
That was back in the 60s, yeah. That's
Yeah,
sort of late 60s.
1967. That was, yeah.
Yeah. And that was 2 years of that before Hawkwind came together.
Prior to, yeah, maybe 3, yeah, 2 to 3 years, that's right, yeah. Oh, you've been reading up.
Trying to. And did the festival with a name like Milkwed or Milky Way, is it all space rock, this festival in Amsterdam?
Well, it wasn't, I mean, Milky Way, you know, apart from just having their concert sort of thing, they have art exhibitions there, you know, they do drama shows. It's quite a big, I mean, once upon a time, it was somewhere else actually. It was in a different part of Amsterdam, but then they got this premises, there's a big warehouse by the canal, and it's all been redone out. Lovely place now, you know, nice stage and nice cafe attached to it, so you can have your dinner there too.
Oh, wow.
So it was jolly fun, you know.
Yeah. And there was also, as we come to the end of this lovely summer, there was also the Hawkfest, which this time ventured up north.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Garstang.
By the River Brock as well. There was also Brock's Bottom there.
So you played in Brock's Bottom?
Yes, it's a nice river actually. Yeah, it was a nice spot, weather wonderful, you know, everything was just right. It was a monster to get together. I mean, it was a lot of work. Actually, Chris did most of it, you know.
Right. How many Hawkfests have there been so far? Tell us a bit.
Just 2.
This is
one,
the second
one in Devon, yeah, one in the southwest and one in the northwest.
Right, right. And how do the two compare this year last
well,
year?
Well, both wonderful spots actually. I mean, the southwest was overlooking the sea in a lovely unspoilt valley, and this one was by a river. You know, there's a lot more people at this one because last year we had the problem of the Turner doing Hawkwind at Guildford Festival, which caused a lot of problems with us, you know.
Right. Do you want to talk
As
about
that?
No,
we don't want to talk about that anyway.
You don't want to talk about that, right.
But yeah, it was very successful. Everybody brought all their kids, loads of fun for family and all that, you know.
Differences between northern audiences and southern ones, or are they all Hawkwind people and therefore it doesn't matter?
Well, I don't think it mattered that much. I mean, we had, you know, we had Arthur Brown on Friday night. There was a lot of bands playing there. We had the Levelers on Sunday night. So,
right.
You know, there was a lot of good bands playing in between. It was quite interesting. So,
right. Any blues bands going back to your roots?
Not really, no.
Just
mainly
rock?
sort of dance and sort of country music and lots of interesting sort of different bands. It wasn't all boring rock music. I mean, you try and make it interesting.
Very.
I mean, maybe next year, if we do it again next year, I don't know if we're going to, because it was such a headache doing it all, you know.
Yeah.
Next year we're going to have Shakespeare. We're going to do a bit of maybe Richard III or something, get the Shakespeare company down, and then also we're going to have jazz, so to make it a bit more sort of arty, you know.
Outdoors this is, yeah.
Outdoors again.
And the weather was good for you this year?
Yeah, a big circus tent. We had 2 stages, you know, so it was all quite together.
And the Hawkwind conventions, are they still happening?
Well, not for a while. When was the last Hawkwind convention we did? Oh, quite a few years ago now. Oh, we've had them since then, only small ones. That was a big one, that was.
What have we gone to?
No. Oh, well, yeah, they do have their little conventions, but we don't always make appearances there. You know. We did a wedding, actually.
Really?
We did a wedding, yeah. Down at Newquay, where we did a wedding. That was quite unusual.
In a wedding marquee?
No, in a hotel.
Right.
Some people that, you know, they met at one of our concerts, and actually we got to know them, and they approached us and said, look, you know, we're getting married. Is it possible that you could play at our wedding? And we said, yeah, all right, we'll do it. as long as you pay the hotel bill. And Arthur came down there and actually married them as well, because he's got
of course,
you know,
he's a man of the cloth.
Man of the cloth, amongst other things. So, so there we are. That was a wedding. So
and talking about Arthur Brown, and he's been with you since that Christmas tour, yes?
Yeah, he's been. I mean, he still does his own things, you know. I mean, he goes off, does solo performances. He had his own band actually at the Hawkfest.
Right.
So he's sort of doing a bit of everything, really, you know.
Mm-hmm. And how did that? Because this DVD, the concert on it, is the very first gig that Arthur did with the tour. So it's very interesting.
He forgot the words. Arthur forgets the words. Yeah.
And how did the collaboration come about? It's an obvious one, but how did it come about?
God, how did it come about? Oh, Canterbury, that was it. Oh, yeah, Canterbury, we did Canterbury, that was it. And Arthur was Master of Ceremonies, and we actually said to him, "Here, do you want to sing Silver Machine with us?" And he said, "Well, I'd love to." Of course, he didn't know the words, so he had lived it through. And then we'd sort of had Arthur's phone number, and we phoned him up and said, "We're doing some dates, fancy." And he said, "Well, how much?" Being a man of the cloth.
So the great sort of theatrics about it.
Yeah.
And Arthur and those sparkly pantaloons.
Yes.
Is that all?
Arthur's own personal wardrobe. Yes.
And the cross, the inverted cross?
The inverted cross is Arthur's. No, the inverted cross came from the. They had a pantomime, didn't they, at Newcastle, and it was part of the props that he had round the back there. There's loads.
He just spotted it.
Well, it was, I think it was a pirate ship there, wasn't it? It was a bit of a pirate ship with all bits and pieces, and Arthur.
Because I was reading all kinds of significance, mystical significance into it, and you know, so that just happened to be there on the afternoon. So I thought, right.
Arthur, he would have liked to have the pirate ship on the stage too. So I mean, you know, it would have been quite good fun actually. We could have made it into a panto.
A starship and
it could have been a panto.
Right.
I mean, that gig was the first one we'd done for a while actually. Yeah. So it was rather, you know, there was lacking of rehearsal. You know, I would say some boys there hadn't rehearsed. Mm-hmm. I do believe Tim Blake was one who had maybe 1 day rehearsal, and Arthur, I think, was only maybe 1 day's rehearsal. You know.
Right.
So I mean, we'd all been practicing like good boys, doing our bits and pieces like we do. And Tim had come over from France.
Right.
And yeah, so we just had to sort of get on with it, really, you know.
And Richard
got better towards the end, folks. Which at the end it was really good.
So Richard, Alan, and yourself. That is like the core.
The nucleus. Yeah.
The nucleus, which has been going for 10, 15 years, really, even longer, hasn't it? Really.
And then Simon House. I don't. Was Simon House doing it? No,
I think it was
Tim Blake.
It was Tim. It was Tim on sort of keyboards and computers.
So I lose track because people come in and out all the time. It's
right.
And we had Harvey at the Hawkfest. We had Harvey. We had Huey. We had Simon Keith. Yeah, we had quite a few.
So Tim on computer was just for that tour, was it?
Yeah, just for that tour.
And then he returned to France.
And he did the first Hawkfest as well, which done his solo spot and all that.
Right. And so obviously the infamous Hawkwind lineup changes are still sort of going on lots. This is the way it happens, or this is deliberate, or do you enjoy it? Or?
Well, it makes it interesting. The fans like it. See, they like to see different permutations. Because when we did the Hawkfest, we had there was Martin Griffin, you know, who used to play drums with us. He came along.
Yeah.
And so we had Harvey, Martin, Huey, and me. Playing a couple of tracks together. I mean, they like to see weird variations, you know. I mean, the same thing. I mean, Arthur, it was quite interesting. And some fans didn't like Arthur, thought it spoiled a lot of the numbers, you know. But I mean, Arthur's a great charismatic character, you know. I mean, when he gets going, he's great. You know, it's the same with us. You have your on and off days, of course. Being a musician, you can't always expect to be wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
We try.
And the actual set list that you had for that tour.
Yeah.
How do you choose a Hawkwind set list ever when you've got 100 albums out and?
With difficulty, sometimes you go on the ones that are easier to play, or quite often on our website we'll ask the fans, what numbers do you want, you know, and so lots of people just send in their emails or write letters telling us what they'd like to hear. We just select a few, you know, and try and merge it so one number goes into another to make it interesting, and you know. And there are ones that we like to do, you know, obviously there's some
Master of the
numbers
Universe
drop,
has
you
to
know.
be in there.
Yeah, sometimes we do it a few years and then we leave it out. And,
Oh,
you know,
right.
there's all these numbers we leave out on, do something
Have
different.
you ever left out Silver Machine?
Yeah, loads of times.
Oh,
yeah.
really? Really?
Yeah, we did. We stopped doing it for years, you know, just, it's like, you know.
Yeah, you've done it.
I mean, it's nice to do it, but it's a bit different, you know. I mean, okay, we did it at Wembley when Lemmy sung it, you know, so when we did that one at Wembley Arena, it makes it a bit more fun, you know.
Tell me about that gig there, the
Wembley Arena,
Yeah.
the chaos of Wembley Arena, you want to know about that?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I think that was the first gig Arthur had done with us, wasn't it? Wembley Arena, wasn't it? I think it was. Apart from after Canterbury, yeah. That was his first proper gig, and of course, you know, we didn't get a sound check either. That was the awful thing. We had all our gear of course, we had Motorhead stuff all behind us, and all our stuff was littering the stage, and it was rather chaotic. So we managed to blunder our way through that.
Right.
A bit hectic, and then, of course, like I say, Lemmy come on and sung, you know, and did his bit.
And the version of Silver Machine that you did at Newcastle, and presumably for that whole tour, it has a whole sort of intro to it, doesn't it? That's quite different.
Don't know, can't remember. I haven't listened to it at all.
You said something about, you know, we're going to do something different, and then it sort of it kind of segues into Silver Machine.
Yeah, don't know. I can't remember. I honestly can't. You know.
Yeah. The actual set designs, in going back through the history of Hawkwind, you know, Space Ritual, Astounding Sounds, Black Sword, all those were sort of very, very deliberate set designs. Do you still sort of go for that on stage? Is that something
if we had a lot of money, yeah.
It's
I
a
mean,
question
it's,
of money,
it's the costings to actually get, you know, doing a huge, great drape, having it all painted up. And Hangman, I think, were the company that used to do it for us, you know, live in Suffolk. It's just quite an expensive business, you know, because obviously, I think in 1982 when we did Choose Your Mask, we had a wonderful three-dimensional set, you know, which was quite good, which was backlit, so it had, it's quite hard to explain this, but I'm sure all the fans will know what I'm talking about. But we had loads of little holes right either side of the stage coming, so you could light through these holes, so it's a wonderful three-dimensional sort of effect.
Right.
All this, you know, and
how much money are you talking about there?
Well, then I know it's about 2,000 or 3,000 quid, which is probably equivalent to about 6 now. You know, so
indeed.
it's quite expensive. Light shows, I mean, you know, it's quite an expensive business.
But the theatrics obviously very, very important to Hawkwind, and so at the moment, you know, you've got the kind of the liquid lights and stuff, and as the backdrop.
Yeah.
Who designs the drapes over the keyboards and things like that? There is.
I don't know. We've had those for years, actually.
Those are relics.
Yeah, they're old relics. The collector's items. Perhaps we hold an auction. That's what. We have an auction.
Well, also at the auction, your Stratocaster. Who did the paint job on that?
Oh, that was Alan Arthur, who used to work as a roadie for us. He was he used to do lots of sort of murals on sides of houses and things like that. He used to do big ones, you know.
Right.
Very good artist. He also did some album covers. Did quite a few of our album covers as well. So yeah, he did some of that. Painted all our gear up, actually. So I know I'm using stuff that's really old. You've got to remember. I mean, a lot of my gear is really old. I mean, I've still got my old speakers from 1972. Barney Bubbles did. You know, I used to use them, but they're so heavy, humping all this stuff around. You know, and we can get by using just little monitor systems now. You know,
but you
so
prefer
easier.
Yeah.
Less problem for the crew. You know, they're always complaining because I've got this big box with all my stuff in, and it's very heavy. It always takes about 4 people. You know.
Yeah. When you say using old gear, that's one way of looking at it. But Hawkwind, you know, they were always at the sort of the cutting edge of, you know, sound technology. You know, Dick Mick started with audio generators, and that was sort of at the time was new. You have actually kept a very open mind to technology, haven't you? It's not as though you stayed at the audio generator stage, or is that right?
Yeah, we progressed on. We still use a lot of analog stuff. You know, I mean, it's quite fun using analog. I mean, okay, you know, it's nice using, you know, up-to-date stuff, but analog you can twiddle around a bit, and well, you can play the machines. I mean, that's the fun of doing all this, is being able to actually play machines rather than press a button, and you know, you can just sit there and fold your arms. You know, get a computer. I mean, that's loads of people do this. So if the computer goes down, they've had it, you know.
Right.
Blake's one of these ones. He has it all on his computer. He's sitting
Yeah, he's got it there very proudly.
playing away with his one finger, and then something can go wrong, you know.
On the DVD, Dave, I notice you sometimes you're playing your guitar and you suddenly at the end of the number or even during the number suddenly dash over to the side of the stage and flick something there. Is that an effect or something?
Well, sometimes my guitar's midied, and
Yeah,
I can play all
yeah.
the keyboards through my guitar,
Yeah, I
you
read
know,
that,
and I have to flick switches up, and it's very difficult to see sometimes because I only have I have these little numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 about the size of my finger like that, and little buttons that you have to switch over sometimes, and I miss it.
Right.
And of course it doesn't work, you know, all these, because the lights are going, it's quite hard to see. As you get older in life, folks, your eyesight goes down the drain, you know. So I have to put my glasses now on top of my gear and occasionally have a look, you know.
So just sort of going further into that, it's the guitar can go into keyboard.
The guitar can play everything. If I wanted to, I could just go off as a solo performer probably and just do it all by myself, you know. You can do it with a drum machine and just play the whole lot, you know.
Right.
But being a good boy and keeping my old mates going, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of
one day
going back to the old days a bit, talking about that? Have you, Dave Brock, ever thought of? Do you ever play a straight blues number for your own pleasure now? You know, because when
I'm at home,
yeah,
on my playing my guitar, and Chris tells me to stop playing it, and yeah,
because you're playing old blues.
I play loads of things like that. Yeah, mind you, I mean, since Amsterdam, I haven't played my guitar for 3 weeks now. You know, I've stopped. I thought I'd just stop for a while. You know, it's quite good to stop sometimes. Gives you a clear idea of other things. You know.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I play a lot of blues. You know. I can still play my old harmonica like I used to. You don't lose. It's like riding a bicycle. You might get a bit rusty, but once you get going, you know.
Yeah. So talking about now, what I'd like to do is sort of draw it a bit broader and talk about the band members that were on this DVD. And if you could just tell us a bit about where you first met them, what kind of characters they are. You know, obviously we can edit. Obviously we can edit, and just, you know, how you met them, what they bring into the band, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I'd like to do that for the current band, and then also for the legends, you know, the
legends of the lost,
the legends of on the edge of time. Yeah, the main characters in the Hawkwind plot, you know, the Michael Moore. But if we can first of all, Dave, start with the lineup at the Newcastle gig. And Hugh Lloyd Langton, now he goes back a long way.
Hughie goes back to 1970, where I used to go busking at Tottenham Court Road, and Hughie used to work at Ivor Morant's music shop. He was a sales rep there, you know, he used to sort of sell people guitars. And I used to play in the subway, and Hughie used to come past there, and he'd stop because I was doing blues, you know, like I say, playing a lot of blues stuff, and jazz. I used to play blues and jazz. You know. And I got talking to Hughie, that's how I met him, and also I go back, that's where I met John Harrison, who played bass with the original Hawkwind.
That's right, yeah.
And John Harrison used to play with Joe Loss Band, you know, because all these characters were all working in the middle of London, you know.
Right, Mick Slattery?
Mick Slattery, he's a very old friend of mine from Richmond. He goes way back, where we used to sort of hang out in the 60s and all that, you know.
So Hugh you met back in those days.
Yeah.
And what was your first impression of the guy? He's a charismatic man, isn't he, in his own way?
Hughie's quite strange. He's a quirky old character now, you know, he's getting on a bit, you know, he wobbles around with his stick now, you know. Yeah. But
and he was
wonderful guitarist too. I mean, you know, he had a style of his own, but he played in a lot of famous bands over the years, you know. I mean, you know, he's done quite a lot of famous...
Can you name some?
We played with Leo Sayer, was it Badfinger or one of those sort of bands like that? Few American bands, I can't think of their names offhand, but quite well-known bands.
But he was in for a lot of the 70s, wasn't he? And then I think did some health problems set in or something?
Well, he took some LSD and freaked out and, you know, went a bit nutty, and unfortunately had to go away for a while, you know.
How long for about?
Oh, for about a year or so, and then he sort of recovered and sort of went off on his own, sort of doing his own thing, playing session stuff, you know. And he also wrote in the Guitar magazine. He used to have this regular monthly piece in there, you know, he'd write in that and give guitar lessons and all that.
He did a Widowmaker.
Oh, Widowmaker, that was right, Widowmaker, yeah.
Right, moving on to Alan Davey.
Alan Davey.
When did you first meet Alan?
Well, Alan, I had a letter actually from this guy kept writing me letters saying I want to play bass with Hawkwind. That's what he used to send me these letters in around about 1984 when we did Stonehenge. I sort of got in touch with him, said, okay, look, come and play at Stonehenge with us, you know. And also that's Danny Thompson, his mate Danny, who was also the drummer. Danny Thompson's the son of Danny Thompson, the bass player, who's a very well-known character and musician, you know.
Yeah.
And that's how I met Alan, and that was his first time he ever played with us, was at Stonehenge, you know, in front of about sort of 30,000-40,000 people.
So he just wrote to you, sent you tapes saying, I want to be in this band?
I want to be in the band, and we didn't at the time. Who did we have playing bass with us? Harvey, wasn't it? Harvey was getting fed up with playing bass, and he wanted to play keyboards because Harvey used to sort of dabble around doing keyboards and electronics too. So that's how sort of Harvey went on to doing keyboards, and Alan sort of ended up playing bass with us.
Right. And what's his contribution? Say if you're comparing him to someone like Lemmy.
He's a very good bass player. He's the best bass player we ever had because he's been in the band for 16 years.
And a very strong image as well.
Yeah,
the Pharaoh image.
He writes quite a few songs. I mean, the funny thing is, Alan writes fantastic keyboard things. He does some really good sort of weird keyboard stuff as well, which he used to do. He stopped doing it, and he should start doing it again.
Right.
But you know, he's quite good at doing keyboard stuff as well. I mean, when we're doing it as a three-piece, well, I mean, we used to have to operate keyboards as well as our instruments, and of course we used to sort of program stuff. You know? Alan, we used to operate it by our foot pedals and all that.
Right.
He was good at doing that. So
a lot of the 90s you spent doing that as a three-piece.
That's right.
Didn't you?
Yeah.
Was it just a case of too much hard work? You fancied
it was hard work. It was a challenge. You see, I mean, it's like all these little things. You know, you do these different things, and then you think, well, let's have a go at doing that. You know, and see how it works. And we did, and it worked okay.
Right.
So we did it as a three-piece, like I say, with Richard. You know.
Yeah. The electric two-piece era.
That's right. Yeah, I think we did maybe 2 or 3 years as a three-piece, and then sort of we had we used to do other gigs where you get our old boys coming in and sort of doing bits with us, but mainly it was a three-piece. Then we went off to America and did a couple of tours over there as a three-piece. You know.
But there must be a lot of concentration involved in getting all that sort of.
Yeah. We have to pay attention to what's going on, all right.
Yeah. So going back to the sort of late 60s and early 70s, which was, you know, a lot freer and
yeah. I mean,
and substances and stuff.
Yeah, it's responsibilities actually. I mean, what happens? You become responsible. So I mean, you become responsible for running the show. You know, for making it all happen, for organising it all, for working what the lights are going to be doing in conjunction with the music. You know, I mean, it's a monster. It's a lot of weight on your shoulders. You know, all the time, and sometimes it gets you down. You know,
right.
It's hard going. It's not easy. And apart from that, I've driven the truck, you know, I mean, we've unloaded all our own gear, I've done the lot, really, you know.
Right. So you were glad for that phase to come to an end in a certain way, although Electric TP charted, didn't it? And it was acknowledged as a great move forward, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we did actually very well. And then I think the business trip was next, maybe, I'm not sure. I lose track of all these records. Yeah, we did quite well, actually. I mean, we did Brixton Academy, we're selling out loads of gigs. We had a wonderful light show with us as well.
Right.
Isn't that time I got kicked in the knee by the horse? Was it somewhere around there? I had to do it in a chair. I can't remember. Somewhere I had to do a tour in a chair, actually, because I could hardly walk. And that's awful. The next day, actually, I got taken to the hospital. I thought it broke my leg, you know. And the next day, I had to drive our truck up to Leeds, which I stupidly did, you know, with this thing wrapped around my knee. And I did the gig at Leeds University, and I could hardly stand up, you know. I felt really peculiar, and I had to get a doctor on my knee. It had come up twice the size. It was awful. And then the rest of the tour, I had to do it in a chair, and I had to walk around with a stick. It was awful.
Rock and roll.
Poor old boy.
Rock and roll. Richard Chadwick, he's part of the trio as well. Where did you first meet Richard, Dave?
At the free festival that we were doing. Which one was it now? One, gosh, what's the name of that festival? Not the Torpedo Towns one, it was the one, Activator Festival, that was it, up, gosh, I can't remember where it was. Near Worcester, I think, somewhere around there. Richard was sort of doing punk, he was playing in lots of punk bands, he had his own band as well. He used to have a huge big Mohican up there, you know. And we had, I think we had Dumpy's drummer actually standing in for us at the time. I think we played at Worcester Racecourse with Dumpy's drummer, and Chris knew Claire, who sort of was quite, you know, who knew Richard sort of thing, because he lived in Bath.
Right.
And Richard came and, well, he played drums at the festival. Sort of great.
Yeah.
And we asked him to join up with us, and so that was it. And he's
What was
doing
your
this
first
ever
impression
since.
of him as a guy, seeing him?
Oh, he's a nice character, easygoing character, you know, sort of like an old hippie, you know, sort of quite easygoing character.
And just looking at the concert on the DVD, we were trying to work out, do you use clicks to some, because he wears headphones?
Yeah, he
doesn't
wears headphones, yeah, we have everything, well, not everything, maybe about 2/3 are clicked and 1/3's not, you know.
Now that again is quite a move forward, isn't it, from what Hawkwind's roots were, which was very free and easy, and blues is, you know, away from click music, isn't it? You know,
yeah, but it's still free and easy, because the reason why we do it is because we can use sequences. So I mean, I've got a sequencer where, say like we're playing in E, I've maybe got about 10 sequences in E, that so I can just switch on to whatever we're going into, you know, and play whatever we need it to play. So
I see.
you know, you can just carry on. Everybody can stop playing really at sometimes, you know, and you just leave the keyboards going by themselves. And that's the same with Tim. I mean, Tim's got the same thing going in you know, over his side, so he can you know, do it in time as well, you know.
Right. So
and it does make drummers play properly sometimes.
I was just wondering the old thing that they said about drummers and grooves, you know, that they can't be strict, if they were strictly on the click, there's no groove there, but you don't find that.
No, there is, you know, it all depends on what BPMs you use. You know, you can play with anything and swing along. It's a knack of doing it. A lot of people can't do it, you know, but I mean, I can play for about 2 hours with just one chord sort of things, you know. I mean, it's quite easy I do it at home, you know. I just have all my machines running and off I go for about half an hour, and then I switch on to something else. Like, it's just quite easy to do it, you know. But I've been doing it for years, mind you, you know. Martin Griffin could never play with a click, you know. Right. So
there are those that can and those that can't. Just attitude wise.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have it loud in your you know, else you don't hear what's going on. I mean, you imagine when you're whacking away on the drums. You notice lots of drummers do wear them and sort of, you know, use clicks nowadays.
No, I just thought it was interesting, sort of going back to the very early days of Hawkwind. You know, that the music still has the vibe. Yeah. But it's the, you know, the sort of the mechanics of it is quite different.
Yeah, it is. I know what you're saying. It's that free and easy thing, but then you find the tempo sometimes will fluctuate, slow down and speed up. That was the problem. We had. I mean, we have had drummers over the years that have had lots of failings in that. You know, where they have bad days, where everything seems to slow down to this plodding. For Christ's sake, you know. I mean, you know, Martin used to do that occasionally. You know, Martin used to get nervous before he'd go on stage and knock a few tequilas back, you know, and I mean, Bob and me used to get really pissed off about it, you know, and say, look, you know, you're slowing down, it's like, speed up, you know. I mean, one day Bob used to do this thing with a gun. Both of us had guns, actually, starter pistols, you know, looked like the real thing. And Bob used to do this thing where he'd put a bullet in there and he used to do a poem and do Russian roulette and put the gun to his head, you know, because he never used to know if it would go off or not either, you know, and he'd put it out there and go, big drum roll, like this, you know, click, you know. And then one day Martin was playing around there and I pulled the gun out and said, if you fucking slow down again, I'm going to shoot you right in the knee, you know. And he didn't know that. He didn't know it was a starting pistol, you know. Gave him a shock, you know.
So you're happier, in fact, with the you know, the click, and it makes for sort of more.
It does if you're using if you're using sequences with keyboard sequences going, you know. Obviously you need a click because you can't play the keyboards at the same time. And the reason why we use a click is because, like I say, the keyboards are playing by themselves, really, you know, because I've got a sequence playing whatever is going on, you know. But you know, we play a lot of numbers without clicks as well, and I mean, we do it, like I say, 1/3 without clicks and 2/3 with. So we can get by. Even if disaster happened, we could play without it easy, you know. If the worst come to the worst, all the machines failed, you can play the acoustic guitar and, you know, get away with it.
Moving on to Tim Blake.
Yes.
First impressions of Tim Blake. How did you meet him? And
How did I meet Tim? Well, now in 1969, at the office Clearwater Productions, which is Doug Smith's company that he had with Max, what was his name? Max, who's now head of Lloyd's. Can't think what his name is now. Anyway, and this other guy, three of them. Anyway, they have three managers. They run Cochise, Skinali, us, and somebody else. Well, Tim used to sort of be in and out of the office then. That's how I got to know Tim. He was a right nuisance as well. You know, he used to always tell him to shut up. You know, we used to call him Gollum. Actually, that was his nickname. Not Moonweed. He got called Moonweed actually later on when he was with Gong. You know, because he was always getting stoned. You know.
yeah.
But yeah, I've known Tim quite a few years. He's a quirky character, you know. He has his ups and downs. He's a weird character. Lives in a windmill in France.
Right. He's been around the band for a long time, in and out of the band for a long time, hasn't he? So
yeah, he was with us in 1979-80
yeah.
when we had Ginger playing with us then.
Mm-hmm.
Tim was playing keyboards with us then. Then he'd pop up and do something with us, and then he'd go off, and because he was, like I say, he was working with Gong, he went off, he had his own band, the Crystal Machine, that he used to do his own stuff, his solo stuff, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I've known him for a long time.
And has he, you know, in terms of bringing things into the band, was he the main sort of tech person?
No.
Have I done him a great compliment there? Have I done him a great compliment?
Tim operates off of a computer, you know. He's a funny character, you know. He actually does a lot of his stuff on a computer now, you know.
Right.
You know, he's a good musician.
Yeah.
He writes a lot of his stuff. He does his own stuff, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a quirky character. I mean, a lot of people we're all a bit quirky in this band, you know. We've all got, I mean, you find a lot of musicians, you know. I mean, over the years I've known all these characters, you know, and the reason why they're still going is because either they've got great determination or they're a weird, eccentric sort of people, you know. So they're all, you know, it's quite difficult juggling all these different characters in and out of this band, you know, because of their peculiarities sometimes. It's quite hard going, you know.
Now, talking about eccentric characters is a nice link to my next sort of batch of questions, which is I'd just like to read out a list of some of the main characters in this fabulous Hawkwind play that's been going on for 30 years now, over 30 years. The list that I have here is Nick Turner, Michael Moorcock, Dick Mick, Robert Calvert, Stacia, Lemmy, Ginger Baker, Simon King. Now, is that a fair list? Anybody obviously missing from that apart from, I haven't asked about Dave Brock yet, I'm going to do that at the end.
Well, you should ask somebody else about me.
You happy with that list about?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the characters, Dick Mick, now Dick Mick, like I say, bought an audio generator and he learnt how to play an audio generator. Now, if you ever go and buy an audio generator from a shop, electronic try and play it because it's really difficult. And Dick Mick used to actually, we used to laugh at him sometimes. I think, well, he could never get anything together. But when you start listening to what he does, he's actually playing along with the music. He's actually playing. He tried to play what chords we're playing on the generator, which is quite difficult, you know. And I mean, I've got to give it to Dick Mick. You know, for years I never sort of thought, well, he's always stoned and, you know, sort of having a wonderful time flying around the world, you know, and a great. But he was a good musician in what he was doing, you know. Right. So, and he was quite an innovator on electronic music because between him and Del Detmar, who had an EMS synthesizer, between the pair of them, you know, they were quite innovators of
for the late 60s.
Yeah, for electronic music into the rock business. You know, when you think of these characters, there's not very many people were doing this at the time. Okay, I think Brian Ferry had Eno at the time, you know. So I mean, there was only him. And like I say, Del and Dick Mick, you know, and also you go back.
And of course, that intro to Silver Machine,
yes,
is
the intro and all those the whooshing noises, all that sort of thing. You know what I'm saying, though? They are characters that you know should receive a bit of acclaim for what they did.
And did you meet Dick Mick on the Notting Hill scene? Was that?
I met Dick Mick many years ago in Richmond because with Mick Slattery, we're old buddies from from the 60s, really.
From the busking scene and all that.
From when we used to hang out in Richmond when we were young.
Right, the next main player, if we can call it that, Nick Turner.
Yeah.
Where did you meet Nick?
Well, I met Nick when we were doing this tour of Holland, when he was actually a labourer putting the circus tent up, actually. That's how I met in 1967. Then years went past and he popped up again in 1969 when I was living in Putney and came round to see us. By that time we'd got Hawkwind together then. He sort of was a roadie basically. He had a van which was jolly helpful for us because we could all put our stuff in the back and he was the driver, and so we used to do these odd gigs. And you know, from there on he
played a bit of sax.
Popped up with his saxophone, which he couldn't play, but he could make it sing up, you know, like a bit of avant-garde jazz. Oh wow, that's really good, you know.
Yeah.
Perhaps have a bit of that, you know. And from there on, he decided to get himself a wah-wah pedal and you know,
he was away.
Yeah, and pick up, and there you go.
A very theatrical character.
He was very theatrical. He used to like wearing weird costumes on the stage, very, very dramatic, and throwing himself around, you know.
Painted himself silver.
It's a good front man, you know. I mean, that's really it. It was, he used to play his saxophone through all the vocals. It used to piss Lemmy and me off, no end, you know. We were forever telling him not to do it. You know, and sometimes he'd play in the wrong key too, which was very naughty of him. And before now, I've thrown a can of beer and hit him on the head with it. But there you are, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure all sort of Hawkwind fanatics are like, how are you two? What's your contact nowadays?
With Nick?
Yeah.
What, after our court case?
I was going to say,
ring his fucking neck.
Outside of the court, I was going to add on to that. Outside of the court.
I don't have anything to do with him whatsoever.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, he's blown it. There you are, you know. I mean, the same with Lemmy. Lemmy, you know. The funny thing is, he was for saying Lemmy and Dave, they don't get on well at all. You know, Lemmy's going to sue Dave. And there again, we put it all down the drain because we went and played together at Wembley. You know, right, so I mean, that was the end of. That was, you know, just go to show.
Well, if we can just move on to Lemmy. When did you meet Lemmy though? Lemmy, sorry.
Lemmy.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that must have been about 1971 when.
Did you see Star there straight away? Did you see that this guy was going to be like the character, the over-the-top character?
We were all just, you know, stoned hippies. You know, we used to get, I mean, we were doing lots of benefits for lots of underground organisations. You know, we were always getting in a lot of trouble with the police. You know, we were sort of
White Panthers,
and you know, Stop the City campaign and all sorts of things. I mean, the bomb squad were raiding. You know, different members' houses. We were always getting stopped in our van for being searched for drugs and all this thing. And we were quite, you know, a well-known, notorious band in the sense that we weren't all love and peace either. You know, because we were quite involved in lots of other things. You know, so it was Lemmy come along. Lemmy was a mate of Dick Mix, you see, and at the time we had Dave Anderson, who was from Amsterdam. He had left Germany and come and lived in England. And he was sort of playing bass, and he used to drive his sports car, and we used to turn up in our old van. There was a bit of antagonism between and also like we used to play lots of benefits, and I don't think he was up for doing things like that too much. And of course, Dick wanted Lemmy in, you know, because both of them used to take speed as well. We used to take acid, and they used to take speed. So consequences.
A weird social
complication. You know, so.
But you like the guy, obviously, and
I used to share a room with Lemmy, believe it or not. You know, hotel rooms, and you know, he was. Well, I was the guitarist, Lemmy was the bass player. We had to have this repartee together.
But the kind of psychedelic heavy rock that you were doing at the time, the bass was crucial to that, wasn't it? And he did engineer that sort of.
And we had to work together. I mean, obviously, you know, if you can't play together, then you know you're never going to play music, are you? Really?
Have you got a wild story to tell us about how and why you left?
Wow, it's a bit of a tragedy, really, to why he left. It's just due to unfortunate circumstances. We're going through Canadian customs at the time, and in our car, and our manager had said, "Make sure you don't take any drugs across the border with you," you know, and. Lemmy was asleep with his head against the window with his mouth open and the guy tapped on the window, you know, and said, you know, to Lemmy, will you come in here, you know, and what? took him in there, and they decided to search him and found a white powder, you know, which was speed. But at the time they thought it was coke, which then we were on our way to play this big amphitheatre in Toronto. And of course, you know, that was, we thought, well, that's it, you know, they're going to keep him there, he's under arrest. And Douglas said, well, what are you going to do? You need to get Paul Rudolph, was the Nick Turner and Paul Rudolph are old buddies. You see, Paul Rudolph used to play in the Pink Fairies, and Pink Fairies used to play a lot. We used to play a lot of gigs together. Pink Wind, it was called, you know, combination of both bands. We used to do lots of benefits together. And Paul Rudolph was the lead guitarist, I might add. I mean, he was a very good lead guitarist. So it was the beginning of Nick's domination of trying to get rid of members of the band. When you look back, you know, you can see what went on, but at the time you don't realise it. So he said, well, I think what we ought to do is to fly Paul Rudolph over to Canada, you know, and he's also Canadian too, and get him to, you know, stand in for Lemmy sort of thing, which we did. And then we had a band meeting, and of course Lemmy, because of his irregularity on sleeping, you know, so he'd be up for about 3 days on the trot and he'd conk out, you know. And made us late for lots of planes, and you know, it's like a mountain. All these things really, which were molehills, become like mountains when you're on the road. You know, it's a bit different. It's different. It's hard to explain. But when you're travelling around,
a magnifying glass.
You know, we're about 15 people on the road, and you know, you're waiting for one person who's always late. Oh, you know, he's late again. Oh, how many times do we have to tell him? And Douglas would be going bananas, you know, and. Then Nick said, look, you know, well, you know, we won't be able to go back to America again now. You do realise he's jeopardised it for everybody and all this whole sort of thing. And
so that was it?
That was it. I was the one who had to go and tell Lemmy, you know, in the hotel, which was quite an awful thing to have to do, you know. And he was really upset.
Interesting, you mentioned just a bit earlier about Nick and the domination and the power games. And in a band that started out very much as a, you know, sort of let's all jam together, is it inevitable in the music business, once it becomes money and business, is the power thing an inevitability?
Well, it is and it isn't, because you've got to have a captain of the ship, you know. I mean, no matter any band, you've got to have somebody else. The total thing will fall apart. If you don't get somebody so right, okay, we're going to play this number or we're going to do that. You've got to have some sort of strategy. It's like running an army, isn't it? You know, you got with guns blazing and whatever you're doing, generals, captains, and you know, soldiers and so on. You have to run things like that. So you can be free and easy with the camaraderie sort of thing, but you have to draw the line somewhere where you're going to have to say, this is what we're going to be doing. I mean, when we used to go on stage, we'd have our numbers that we were going to do, but they were very free and easy, so we could actually play one number for 15 minutes if we wanted to, you know. So I mean, we can actually. But
inevitably, personalities. Inevitably, that's part of the deal, isn't it? You get people who bunch off into twos and threes.
You get little, you know, little cliques, and you get, you know, and if your confidence isn't very good in a band, you know, sometimes you go through bad days where you don't play very well. You know, might go through a few weeks where you don't play very well. And I mean, instead of thinking, well, okay, he's just going through a bad period, you know, I think, well, get rid of him, you know, and so these little things. I mean,
and they did actually, at one point, they did actually get rid of you, didn't they? Just for
after that, I'm talking about...
the biggest irony, you know, the captain leaves the ship, you know.
Yeah, well, that was, that actually happened, because they had the meeting in London when I wasn't there, you know, after getting rid of Lemmy. It was about maybe, I don't know, 6 months later, maybe, I don't know, or a year later. It was in 1976. In Tony Howard's office. Tony Howard was manager of Mark Boland, and also a well-known Chelsea supporter actually as well. And they had a meeting without me and decided Nick had put this thing forward to get rid of me and have Paul Rudolph playing lead guitar, because Paul Rudolph, like I said, was the lead guitarist, you know. So that would be me out the window, and also the band were sounding funky. Then it was, you know, that funky beat was in, and I was more into playing space rock music, you know. And then Bob Calvert rang me up and said, "Oh, we just had a meeting up in London, and you're sacked from the band, but I disagree with it. I think you ought to come up to London immediately, you know." Right. So I went up there, had a meeting with Tony Howard and Bob and Simon King. And they said, look, you know, we disagree with this, you know, and that was it. So out went Paul Rudolph, Nick Turner, and Alan Powell. You know.
So the Hawk Lords phase, when that was a bit later on.
That was a
wasn't
little bit. That was.
That wasn't to do with that fracas.
90. No, that was. It was something to do. It was the leftovers from it. You know. I mean, it sort of when the Hawk Lords. We decided to call ourselves Hawk Lords because we were doing the. What we were doing, a wonderful stage show based on Fritz Lang's. What was that? God, I can't think. My brain stopped working. Well, we were doing this big show anyway, and we decided to call the Hawk Lords, and then we did that. Then we went back to Hawkwind again after that.
You mentioned that's the next main character.
Metropolis we were doing, yeah.
The next main character in the plot, obviously Robert Calvert, the late great Robert Calvert. Where did you meet him?
He's an old mate of Nick's from Margate, because that's where Nick was born, and that's where Bob come from. And Bob was living in Notting Hill Gate, and he was making his living as a poet. And he used to, Nick brought him along one day and said, you know, Bob would like to do some poetry with us, which he did, and that was it. And Bob went on from doing poetry to the vocals and writing huge amounts of stuff, you know. I mean, between me and him, we wrote loads and loads of songs together. You know,
he brought a heck of a lot into the band ideas.
He did, yeah. He was a very clever guy. He was also very erratic. You know, have mental breakdowns going in and out of sanatoriums. You know, he'd be up and then down. It'd be fantastic for maybe a few months or years, and then he'd have a breakdown. You know, and be awful. Very difficult for him travelling around on the road. You know, he caused terrible mayhem. But I mean, his mayhem was so unbelievable, you know.
As a stimulus for the band.
Yeah, I mean, it'd drive you nutty. I mean, I'd stay up for days on end sometimes, you know, talking him out of killing himself and doing all sorts of weird things, you know, going to smash people's windows and getting them, all sorts of weird carries on. Anyway,
but he died of a heart attack.
Yeah, he did actually. Yeah, and we'd actually played at the Leeds Science Fiction Festival, and he had his own band, Captain Lockheed and the Starfighters, and we'd actually met up because Lemmy and me had played together. I think prior to all this, we'd actually started doing the Earth Ritual. We had this idea of doing the Earth Rituals with Bob, and we'd actually recorded a couple of tracks which came out on Flick Knife with Lemmy playing bass, and then, like I say, I met up with Bob again, and we were talking about doing an album together, and you know, getting it all together. He was really exciting, enthusiastic, and it was all going forward. And then he died, unfortunately. He died on when I was playing that festival, an activated festival, wasn't it? Tewkesbury, yeah, that's right. And I was just in the middle of having my dinner actually, and then Nick Turner come walking around with just a little towel around his waist and said, "Oh, I've got some bad news." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, unfortunately, Bob's died, you know." So there we are.
And another theatrical character to round this bit off, Stacia.
Oh, Stacia, yeah.
When did you meet her? And
when?
She was the first I ever heard about Hawkwind. You know,
Stacia we met actually at a petrol station in Exeter, because that's where she lived. She was working as a petrol pump attendant, I think, you know. And I think as we stopped there, Nick had asked her, well, I think we were going off to playing Red Ruth down in Cornwall, and Nick had asked her if she'd like to come and dance with us. And,
oh, right. So it was Nick's idea.
Yeah, I don't know how they got talking about her dancing, so I can't remember. Anyway, she ended up, you know, dancing with us.
Was that, as you remember it, were you happy about that? Or were things,
fine, yeah, we were very free. We had quite a few different girls dancing with us, you know. I mean, we were in the era of, you know, sort of, people used to take their clothes off and do all sorts of weird things.
That's what I said, that's the first I heard of it, you know, it's a very good reason to go to a gig.
Yeah, and lo and behold, Stacia just did that, you know, but it just seemed to be part of the norm, because lots of people used to do that at that time, you know. You've got the love-ins, you've got, you know, don't forget all these things were going on everywhere, you know. People used to take their clothes off and smoke dope, didn't they, so they wouldn't get arrested. And
If we can just go on to the last bit, Dave, which is the big, actually let's focus now on, which was the very first gig of the Christmas tour, Christmas 2002.
Newcastle.
Yeah. The Newcastle gig, and there's a set list there. Let's just go through it very sort of quickly. And any, did you enjoy the gig, or was it a folk gig from?
I thought it was rather frenetic and hectic.
Right.
I didn't particularly enjoy it. No, I found it quite hard going because there's a lot to do, and like I say, we're a bit under rehearsed, and you know, it's a bit of argy-bargy beforehand, wasn't there?
But the crowd response was great.
Yeah, I mean, everything went all right. It's just that, I mean, you always like things to be right, you know what I mean? I would never film the first gig. I filmed the last two, you know, always, not the first one. It's the worst. I mean, the video we've got a video of the last one, which is fantastic. It's really good, the soundtrack, everything's spot on, I mean, all that's really quite exciting. So, I mean, you know, and the thing is, I think then Huey wasn't there then, because Huey had his problems of becoming ill, wouldn't he? I think when he had his, he was a bit ill, Huey was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he didn't do the last two gigs.
No.
Right.
And I mean, prior to that, he had, he's got his, what's that bone thing he's got?
Well, he's got hyperglycemia.
Hyperglycemia and
Blood sugar, isn't it?
Osteoporosis. I don't know if he's got that, but he breaks his bones.
His
fragile bones.
Yeah, and now he just sort of fractured his hand by falling onto, you know, slipping over and putting his hand up and it to go. You know, all these little things start happening to him. And he was very ill. The year before, he was very ill.
Right.
He had Legionnaire's disease, which made him really ill. He was delirious. In fact, he had to be taken to hospital. You know. So I mean, he wasn't very well. So he started off doing that tour as not very well, you know.
Right. So if we can just go through very quickly and give us a one-liner just to finish off with. Thanks ever so much for answering all my questions so far on this marathon
Race.
Just a one-liner about each of the numbers in the set list. That would be great. You know, anything. So starting off with Aerospace Age Inferno.
What do you want me to tell you
just
about it?
Who wrote it, or just something about the song?
That's a Bob Calvert number.
Right. What's the sort of essence of it?
What's it about?
Yeah.
Oh man. What's the words? I can't remember what the words are. Aerospace. Well, it was to do with the starfighters. In actual fact, you know, which is a long story with the American government sending starfighters to the German government, and they were forever crashing. And
so
all
it's
the German pilots.
It's a political
statement
written by Bob.
Yeah,
Calvert,
and that was part from Captain Lockheed album. So that's one of the actual songs about destruction of the starfighters.
Thank you.
Aerospace Age Inferno.
Right. Angels of Death.
Angels of Death. What's that about? Oh man, you're not going to ask me all this, like, are you?
No, just going through it, you know, from what era, what you know, how long you've been playing it, how often you gig it, you know, why did it get into the set?
Well, let's see, we started doing that in 1977, I think.
Right.
At Barnstable Town Hall was the first time we actually played.
So you see, you've got a fabulous memory when it sort of goes through.
Yeah, well, the reason being, because we actually had a band called the Sonic Assassins then.
Yeah.
We actually did Barnstable City Hall. We did a pantomime actually with Footspan Theatre Company, and that was why I remember it.
Right.
And that's the first time we ever did it.
Right. Out of the Shadows. Anything you remember about Out of the Shadows?
Out of the Shadows was written by Alan, me, and Doug Doug Walker from America. Yeah, he sent me the words over and said, "Hey, Dave, I think he played in a band, didn't he, Doug Walker?" So I recollect. He had his own band, American space rock band.
Right. Time Captives.
Time Captives, one of Arthur's old numbers from his early days.
Master of the Universe.
Master of the Universe is an old number that we've done on and off for years now.
Totally associated with the band in a certain way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Song of the Gremlins.
Song of the Gremlins, that's from Captain Lockheed again. That's another interesting piece. I mean, some of these pieces are good for Arthur, you see. I mean, that's why we select them. So certain numbers are good for Arthur to perform on, and the Gremlins is a very good number because, one, he did it actually on the Starfighter, Captain Lockheed, the Starfighter's album, you know.
Yeah.
So some of these numbers are specifically for, like, Arthur, you know, because it's a spoken bit in the middle, you know.
But the Gremlins are, in the legend, are goodies, not baddies, aren't they?
No, the Gremlins are the ones that are actually destroying the the aircraft, didn't they?
Oh, I
'Cause
see.
they
Oh, right, right.
put the hole in the Zeppelin, I think,
Oh,
you know,
right.
and burst the balloon, and they do
Yeah.
all these little, you know what gremlins are.
Yeah, yeah.
Things
yeah.
go wrong, you know.
Yeah,
I blame
yeah.
it on the gremlins, you know.
No, I understood that
I
they
think, yeah.
they were sort of like little revolutionaries. There was
Yeah.
one line, I forget, I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
Okay, Time and Confusion. That's a nice way of describing next
Time
one.
and Confused is one of Arthur's songs,
Yeah.
which I'm jolly pleased to play on, because many years ago, on his first album that he got out, is on there.
Right.
It's linked to Fire. So we were going to do Fire, actually,
Oh.
but we never got round to it.
Maybe some other time.
Maybe one day, yeah.
Hurry on Sundown.
Hurry on Sunday was one of my old busking numbers that I used to do when I used to play in the subways.
Bluesy. Very bluesy.
Yeah, bluesy, you know, see what tomorrow brings. Everybody can relate to that. Get the day over with, see what's going on in the next one.
Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, Tim Blake number, which is about a laser light in the galaxy, you know, drawing, you know, everybody off to something wrong, isn't it? I think. I wish you'd have told me. I could have got the words. I had a quick look.
Sorry. The Watcher.
The Watcher is a Lemmy number.
Right.
I am looking in on you now. You know, I mean, it's basically about CCTV cameras, whole sort of works of being watched, really. You know.
Alan performs that one. Yeah, Alan sings that.
Yeah, Alan sings that because
Yeah.
he tries to copy Lemmy. You know, tries to sing in a gravelly voice.
Is he a huge fan of Lemmy's?
Yeah, he used to model himself on Lemmy, Rickenbacker bass.
That was the
many years ago. Yeah.
Right. So
Used to drink Jack Daniels, but I think Lemmy can outdrink
And
him
then he-
any time.
Still.
Still, yeah.
Assassins of Allah.
Assassins of Allah, well, that's another one of those great numbers which the storyline goes on forever, doesn't it? You
Right,
know, what about
right.
oil and so on.
Earth Calling.
Earth Calling. What was that? Earth Calling? Well, yeah. Well, this is Earth Calling, yeah.
Sonic Space Attack.
Is that on there? I can't remember what it
Yeah.
was.
It's the lead into Silver Machine, I think.
Is it? I
Maybe
have
it's
no
the lead-
idea. I can't remember what the lead is. I have to
So
hear these things.
If the last non-difficult
we
question.
do
I'm sorry.
change things. I mean, it's
Yeah,
hard,
sorry.
you know, because you
Yeah.
ad-lib a lot of these
Yeah,
things. I have no
yeah, of
idea
course.
what they were at the time,
Yeah.
you know.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's just to sort of put in, you know, so
Yeah, I know
the
what
actual
you're saying,
songs.
yeah. You can quickly cut to Dave
Yeah.
saying, well, I can't remember what it was, you know. What did we do? You know?
We wouldn't do that.
I don't remember what happened.
So lastly, Dave, Silver Machine.
Yeah.
Do you still have obviously cherish a lot of good feeling about that song?
Well, yes. Yes, because I probably, if I wouldn't be here now, sitting in front of these cameras talking to you folks, if it wasn't for that wonderful golden oldie. I mean, it's you know, worked wonders for us really over the years. Kept the band going on and off.
But there have been times when for years you've dropped it from the set.
Yeah, we've not played it.
Mm.
You know, you can't play it for 30 years. You know, I mean, like Hurry on Sunday, I don't play that all the time either. So
Right.
loads of these songs, like you say, I mean, we change them all the time.
Right.
To make them interesting. It'd be very boring if we played the same thing over and over again. I mean, fans sometimes do expect you to do these things, and they are disappointed
If you don't, yeah.
if we don't do it. But you know, like I say, you've got to change everybody. I like to tell you, it's hard going now.
And especially after 1 hour of interview. So Dave Brock, thanks ever so much for your time and patience.
Well, thank you very much.